What up, everyone? This is the Twice Over Film Club, and I'm your host, Faraz. Today, we're previewing No Country for Old Men, a listener-suggested film. You can make suggestions by hitting us up at the Twice Over on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. This Thursday, we will be discussing Inside Man, so get that watch in before then. If you have Showtime, it's available there for streaming. Other upcoming movies include Vivarium, Lincoln Lawyer, Silver Linings Playbook, Garden of Words, The Lighthouse, and as far as what's been released, last few weeks were The Fountain, Birdman, and Crazy Stupid Love, so make sure you check them all out. Alright, so today it's myself, Fahad, and Yusuf for No Country for Old Men.
Hey guys, what movie are we doing again? Are we doing No Country for Old Men or There Will Be Blood? Because I'm a little confused. They're both westerns from 2007.
We're doing No Country for Old Men, and we're never gonna do There Will Be Blood, man. I'm not sitting down to watch that again, to be honest.
What?
I really didn't like it. I think it's long and slow and
What?
boring.
Get out of here. Just
I know,
kill yourself.
I know you like it a lot. Yeah, so we're doing No Country for Old Men, a listener suggestion suggested by Ersheen.
Well, thank you for the suggestion, Oisin. Much appreciated. I gotta say, I was not expecting this type of movie from Oisin. I don't know why. Doesn't seem like her type of movie. That's not a knock. It's just...
Yeah. Ersheen mentioned the draw to this was how great the villain role is, Anton Chigurh.
part of it. I mean, I think there's a lot of this movie that is, it kind of catches you off guard, and I think Javier Bardem is certainly one of those things, right? And I think that's a lot of what plays into what people liked about this movie a lot. So, and I think, so I think Oisin was hitting on that, where it's like your expectations are kind of thrown in a movie like this, and so you walk out of it kind of. I don't know if you guys felt this way, but I think I just liked it, but I was like really confused about how to gather my thoughts after I had finished it.
So I didn't know that this was a Western when I first watched it. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I watched it, let's go over it. So this is 2007, right? The Coen brothers directed this movie. And I was a pretty big Coen brothers fanboy at the time.
Having watched Fargo?
I had watched Fargo, Big Lebowski.
Okay. So
I had no idea this was a Western film because I guess it's not what I had seen from them before. There's almost no comedy in this.
Right.
Where the other ones are mainly comedy.
Yeah. There's only one moment of comedy in No Country for Old Men, and it's great.
It caught me off guard because I thought it was going to be somewhat similar to Fargo or Big Lebowski. And it's a Western. I didn't know it was a Western. It's probably my first Western that I actually liked. Maybe I can only think of like one other one that I liked, which was Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Mm-hmm. So this falls under like a neo-Western, right? It's not exactly cowboys, pistols, and whatever.
No, but so it definitely is not a traditional Western. It's just a little bit more contemporary, I think, in its setting, at least by the feel of it. I actually don't know what year the movie's supposed to take place in, but
1980s.
There you go. So that's not necessarily, maybe by timeline, but certainly by the feel of the movie, it feels a little bit more contemporary. And oddly enough, I mean, the Coen brothers have kind of a weird makeup of their filmography, right? Like it's like half Westerns somehow, I feel like. And maybe this was kind of the first one, but like they've really hit on those notes several times since then, right? They did Inside Llewyn Davis. They did, which I believe is the Western, right? Ballad of Buster Scruggs, True Grit. So like they dove in on the genre after that, which is kind of cool. I don't even know how I feel about all of those. I've only seen True Grit out of those, but yeah, it's interesting to me that they obviously really love that kind of style.
Like this is weird, right? Because me and Fahad have also done for this podcast. We did A Serious Man, which is directed by these guys, and again, it's just so out of the element of what this film is.
So Serious Man, I think, takes place around the same time that this does, No Country for Old Men, which is like the 80s, 70s or 80s, and the photography on the two movies, they're pretty similar, right? Wouldn't you say?
And that would make sense because it was the same cinematographer for both of them.
Roger Deakins?
Yes.
Oh, all right. Makes sense.
All right, so let's get into our scores for the film. I'll start with the narrative. I gave the narrative a 90.
I also gave the narrative a 90.
I'm at an 80. I wouldn't necessarily argue with you guys though, honestly. It's an interesting narrative, right? I mean, I think it's very simple and easy to follow, but it is super engaging the whole way as well. And it seems like there's not a lot of fluff to it either.
Right, the dialogue's pretty minimal. The plot's pretty straightforward in that it's a chase setup, and then there's a little bit of dialogue that kind of adds to the themes. towards the end. But yeah, it's pretty simple.
Say like my 90s mainly weighing the direction more than anything, because like you guys just kind of mentioned, the story is kind of simple, it's easy. It's not a story heavy where you're paying attention to every little detail of what's about to happen, what's going to happen, how it's gonna unfold, and I think all of that falls under direction for me.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think so. Because it's interesting trying to break these into different categories where a lot of things kind of overlap in both. But I do think the directors played a pretty a heavy hand not a heavy hand on screen, but they certainly were a controlling factor in some of these portrayals. And so like I'm giving them some credit for that. I think some of the portrayals were even like the minor stuff. I want to say like even minor characters in this movie, like
I would absolutely agree.
right, characters that are in the movie for 2 minutes, somehow you feel like you know them and you like know like what type of person they are and their backstory, and they have like very distinct personalities. And I don't think that comes only from the actors. A lot of the actors I've never seen before, maybe I'll never see again, right? Like it's just like it's a face I won't even remember, but I'll remember that character. So I think that's them coming through in those characters.
I'm gonna segue that into our writing, because this is why I gave the writing 100, specifically for what Yusuf just said, because I think the writing drove a lot of that for those different characters, even the minor ones.
I also gave it a 90. Oh wait, you gave it 100.
Yeah,
I just meant like a equally high score, I guess.
Yeah, I mean I'm at a 92 for what it's worth. So we're all in like must watch to world class range. So like let's not fight about it, right?
So it's interesting, right? Because the dialogue's pretty minimal in this film.
Very.
And what we have to go off of is it's the character quirks, right? It's the gas station clerk acting in a certain manner when he's frightened by Sugar. It's the cowboy toting detective on Sugar's case. They all have their specific demeanors and personalities, and
Interesting. Okay, so the only gap between you not giving it that perfect score is because there just wasn't that much writing to assess.
I wouldn't say it's that. I don't mind the minimalistic dialogue. The reason why I don't give it 100 is it didn't strike me as it's perfect.
Okay.
There was a little bit of waxing poetic dialogue that kind of felt out of
definitely.
place, especially towards the end of the movie.
Yeah, there's a couple of scenes like that. There's also, I mean, I think there's like at least one character that kind of just bothered me, or not bothered, didn't like take me out of it, but felt a little fluffy, I guess I could say. Actually, yeah, Faraz, I would push back and say I think I actually credited it for the lack of dialogue in places. I mean, I kind of like the minimalist take on it. I don't know if that's weird because I like super complex, like high concept films too. But I mean, they use such little, and they use silence in a manner of excellence in this film also. And
Right.
I don't really know where that fits in the scoring, but I think it does fit in the writing because,
Yeah.
pulling your hand back is a skill as well, choosing when not to have any sort of exposition. I think it's something that I wouldn't even think about, but I think I really, really appreciate it in that. And it's probably something the Coen brothers have kind of mastered because, just trying to think of the other films I've seen, I think they've used kind of that aesthetic before. And I mean, it really has a good effect. It really puts a lot of emphasis on what you do say and what you do include in the dialogue.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the silence is used to build up dread in this case because it is a movie filled with suspense.
Mhm.
The silence allows you to ratchet up the suspense in the similar way to what Denis did in Sicario. The stillness is what gives you the payoff.
Well, builds the anticipation.
Right. You're waiting for the violent moment to come. You don't know when it's coming. You just know it is coming.
As a fan of Red Dead Redemption for us, do you enjoy kind of there's like a very Western style of speaking, like everything is almost banter, and it's like
Oh,
they're talking
God.
very in like simple terms, but also they're like using very complex words at the same time. It's like it's so interesting to me, and I mean,
Overcomplicating it, but saying simple things.
exactly like
Yeah.
and it's like an art form. There's so many quotables in this movie, I think, and you might not think that's true, but I could like everything is almost funny when it's not supposed to be, and it's
Hey, give some examples.
So I wrote down a lot of quotes. I'll give you one quote because it's straightforward enough and it's pretty early in the movie. Someone asked, "Where you get that pistol?" at the Getting place.
I literally have that written down on my sheet as well.
Crack me up.
Yeah, because like, and that was the end of the line of questioning. You know, it was like it's so funny to me, like the way that they interact. Like I said, the Coen brothers really love this genre, and they've gotten good at it, I think, over time. But this is probably pretty early on, as far as their dive into it. And like, I mean, I think it was great, and really the silence does balance that out. You know, it doesn't make it overbearing.
And the silence is great because it showcases the Coens' lack of need for any movie soundtrack. Did you notice that this movie had absolutely no soundtrack?
Yeah, we're gonna. I definitely want to talk about that in the aesthetic section too.
For sure.
But yeah, like those two factors definitely compound to really give you like pin drop silence a lot of the time, right? And so yeah. I mean, I think we've said enough on it, and I'm making a case that I should have gone higher than a 90.
Yeah, I really had like zero complaints. That's why I went with the 100.
What did you guys give the score for acting?
So here's what some of the complaints you had, Fahad, for the writing. I actually kind of pushed it towards the acting for specifically one character, and I gave this an 80.
I gave it a 95. I want to hear this complaint that you have.
I'm at a 90, so looks like Faraz is a little bit lower than us. So yeah, let's hear it.
So other than Javier Bardem, I didn't feel anyone was exceptional by any means. I think what really carried them was the writing. So that's why my writing score is as high as it is. But the only character, Ed Tom, I just feel like the writing for him wasn't great. And then his acting was also just whatever. So he's probably the lowest on the entire totem pole for the actors in the movie. But yeah, other than Javier Bardem, I just wasn't that impressed. I just didn't think the acting was doing much. I thought it was mainly the writing carrying them. Well, I guess you guys had a better balance than me, but still.
I thought Tommy Lee Jones, Javier Bardem, Josh Brolin, they all knocked it out of the park with their characters, and they were perfectly cast. And to me, there was nothing left to say because their acting was perfection. I was going to give this total acting score mostly based off the supporting work, the supporting actors, just because there could have been some flaws there, but none of the supporting performances were flawed at all. Even the throwaway gas station clerk guy had an amazing performance. I
can echo a lot of what you said. I mean, it's just the fact that all the way down the roster, it felt like we were getting pretty good performances. I honestly agree with you, Faraz. I don't know that Tommy Lee Jones was like amazing or anything, but I felt like Javier Bardem was really good. Josh Brolin was quite good as well for me. And because of how little there was in terms of dialogue, you really do have to rely on the characters' demeanor, their looks, their, everything about the way that they carry themselves gives you a sense of what's going on in a lot of scenes. I think that I felt that was particularly true for Josh Brolin. And so I hesitated to take too much credit away from them because of that. It's just the style of the film naturally makes you rely on their performances a little bit more.
You mentioned something. It's the way the actors are carrying themselves, right? It's the demeanor that's speaking to you. Sheriff Ed Bell, right? His character was supposed right? Ed Tom Bell, right?
Yeah, I think he's got a 3-part name, guys.
Okay.
This is a Western. Let's get real. His name's Ed Tom Bell. So
right. He's supposed to carry this resigned demeanor, right? Because he's tired of all this violence, and he hits that. What did you find that was flawed about his performance?
Over the top.
If anyone does exposition in this film, it's him, right? He rambles on quite a bit. I think it's baked into his character. Certainly. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just not a huge fan of Tommy Lee Jones. Like it's even hard for me to kind of put specifics on it. Other than that, it's just that there is a bit of running on a bit.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I do have something to say about it, but it's going to give away a little too much, so I'm going to hold it for the discussion.
Sure. Let's just move on then.
All right. Yeah, let's go on to our themes. Here I gave it a 70.
I give it a 95.
I'm at an 85. But you guys fight. Go ahead.
All right. You didn't find any themes in this for us?
No, I did find one very big major theme that will probably go much more in detail in the discussion. Otherwise, though, I didn't catch many things other than that. And I also didn't think that it was well done. It was a little too obvious, not subtle. And then I think all of this falls back on the same character, Ed Tom Bell, man. He's like the one who is presenting the themes literally every time he talks, and it kind of just annoyed the hell out of me.
It opens with his dialogue, right? And he's talking about his his fear of meeting something that he doesn't understand. So it gives you the sense that, he's a little bit too old for his job or whatever. But then as we get into the whole chase sequence of the movie where it's like the Ken Mouse game, we don't get much in the way of themes. We just get an understanding of the characters, and then we kind of have to interpret how these characters came to be who they are, right? And to me, that added to the thematic depth of this movie. This was a story of morality. It was a story of determinism, of fate, of chance.
The one thing I would say is I do think actually there are some themes that are carried through like from start to finish of the movie. I don't really think it's necessarily in chunks, but let's save this to discuss in more detail. But I actually do think that we get chunks of kind of thematic elements from all sorts of different characters actually throughout the the meat of the movie.
All right, for sure. Yeah, themes are kind of hard to discuss without giving away spoilers. We'll go on to the aesthetic score. Here I gave it 100.
I gave it a 95.
95.
We loved it.
So Fahad, you already mentioned there is no score to this movie. There's literally no music from start to finish.
Yeah, Christopher Nolan can learn something from this movie.
Okay, so we're coming off of Tenet, which was probably aesthetically, at least from the sound perspective, really horrible. Can't even hear most of the dialogue, so I'm not going to argue that one too hard. But I mean, this actually gave me like, if you've seen The Wire, which has like very, very little music, it just gives you a very raw feeling to the entire, performance, kind of, right? It makes it feel more real. It makes it feel more, I don't want it, I'm going to use the word gritty. I don't want to, because I feel like you can call every Western gritty, but it does give you that feeling, right? And I think I appreciated that here as far as the tone that it was carrying.
Right. The soundtrack of the movie, it's the textures of the world in which the characters inhabit. It's in one of the chase sequences, it's the sound of the diesel engine that's pretty loud and terrifying. In other scenes, it's like the sound of water or gunshots or shattering glass. It's very textured in that way.
Yeah, exactly. The sound mixing has a lot to do with it because, they do ramp up the volume on certain scenes for certain sounds to get the immersion factor going for the audience. But then visually too, guys, this movie was like perfect visually. I really like Westerns. Just like big landscapes with like, the sun, like the golden hour, all that stuff. And it was so perfectly framed. Every single shot was framed so perfectly. Even like the set designs were so good. Inside, outside, in the car, in the motels, wherever they were, everything you could have paused it and it'd be like a perfect photograph because it was framed perfectly. The set design was perfect. The lighting was perfect. The colors were perfect. It was just good looking movie.
Can you talk more about what you mean when you say the framing? Because I think that's something that not everyone's familiar with, and I'm like not even the most proficient in that. So like, tell me more about what you mean when you say that and what you're looking for there.
So framing, I would say, is really looking at where the subject is placed in any particular frame, and then what surrounds them and what catches your eye, and then all the little details that you can pick up like in a single frame because of how well it's placed. So think of an example would be very early on, you have a shot where there's a reflection off the TV and you have the light beaming off behind the character's head, and then he's kind of squared up in the top right corner of the TV. But then you see like the TV set, like how old it is, and it gives you like it puts you in that, and it's a mobile home, like how small it is, how confined that space is.
Yeah.
So it tells you a lot from just one frame.
Everything's like very intentional and done for a reason. There's nothing that's like,
there's no fluff to it. Yeah.
Right. It's only everything that's essential makes it into the frame.
Yeah, exactly. It's also somewhat minimalistic because
that's like the theme of this movie, right? It's like minimal dialogue, minimal sound, and it goes for the visuals too, right?
The tone of the movie carries through the visuals.
I think there's several shots also. I mean, when you're talking about kind of like, a solitary, a truck or something in a large field, I mean, they use really, really wide shots to give you like the breadth of that, right? And there's one shot that I'm thinking of particularly where it's like, there's literally nothing on the horizon except for like one mountain right in the middle of the shot, and for some reason that like image like really stuck with me. But yeah, I mean I think that's certainly true here, and I think also as complementing that is the fact that they don't use a lot of different shots in every scene. I don't know if this is something you guys noticed, but it's just like I feel like they like picked a couple angles and like they stuck with them for the entirety of a scene because it had everything they needed, and they didn't need to say, okay, like let's cut and like let's get the next piece of dialogue from this angle so we can see the TV, and then we'll cut over here so you can like they didn't have to do that because they chose very intentionally, and then they were able to carry one one vantage point through and it's not even one vantage point. Usually it's a few, but like they really keep that number down.
Yeah, the consistency of it was great.
Yeah, they kept the editing to a minimal. That's what you're getting at, right, Yusuf?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, because they didn't need that many shots, that makes the editing actually very simple too. I mean, it does something for you because it's not just like cut. It's not like you're constantly on the move even within one scene, right? You're kind of a little bit more stationary, whatever. It feels a little bit more slow paced in the moment.
And I think it works very well for this film, right? Because if they're not making cuts, you're forced to stare at the characters for longer periods of time, and you get to like study their faces and try to understand them better.
Yeah, you're in that moment with them a little bit more. We're all very complimentary of this, obviously. I think aesthetic wise, I mean, we would probably all averaging our score it would be the highest for aesthetics, right? I don't know. I mean, I'm okay with that. I mean, yeah. I think between that and the writing is really where I really love this movie.
Yeah, sure. So overall, we all do like this movie quite a bit. I gave it my tally comes out to a 91, Fahad 93, Yusuf 86. But like Yusuf just said, our highest score is easily aesthetics. It averages out to a 97. Next is actually our writing, and that comes out to a 93. And then narrative and acting are very close at about 87, 88. So themes are the only one that kind of got pushed down, and I think it's only because of me. Otherwise, yeah. This movie would have been like a 85 plus in each element. Highly recommended movie, and easy to recommend, I think. It's hard to come out of this feeling dissatisfied.
Right. So even though it's a sophisticated movie, it has a pretty simple plot running through it. I'd recommend it.
I was kind of like, as I was trying to score this movie, I was naturally looking for like, which category did it really not hit in, like, because I'm like noticing I'm kind of high in several categories. I'm like, well, what didn't it do well? And I couldn't go that low on anything. And so, I mean, that kind of tells you it's a pretty complete movie, right? And on top of that, it tells me that pretty much anyone will be able to appreciate at least some aspect of this, whatever their taste is. They're gonna find something in this movie they can kind of appreciate, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a very high compliment for a movie, and it's a very high compliment for a movie that won a hell of a lot of Oscars. Because usually there's kind of there's division there. The movies that win big at the Oscars are not always the ones that you can broadly disseminate, right? You can't always do that for the Oscar winners. That's certainly the case for this one, I think.
Yeah, let's just bring up the ones that it did win. It won Best Motion Picture of the Year. It won Best Performance by an Actor in a Supporting Role, which was Javier Bardem. Best Achievement in Directing, the Coen Brothers. Best Writing, Adapted Screenplay, Coen Brothers. So those are the 4 Oscars it won. It was nominated for cinematography with Roger Deakins.
It lost to There Will Be Blood.
And it probably would have won more in a different year, right? I mean, Fahad, you were saying this before we went live here, but this was a very, very, very heavy movie. I mean, heavy year for the Oscars in terms of movies. Like in terms of it's a powerhouse draft class basically, right?
Right.
So it probably there's years where there's like nothing, and the movie that wins is kind of weak. This one had the opposite problem where it was up against really, really quality stuff, and despite that, it wins. The big 3, right? It wins for Best Picture, Best Director, and Adapted Screenplay in this case, because it is based off of a book by Cormac McCarthy. So, I mean, those are like the 3 kind of coveted ones, right? Maybe I would say original screenplay is probably more coveted, but you get my point.
Yeah.
It wins for those 3, and that's not easy to do in a year like 2008 was.
2007.
For the 2007 year, 2008 Academy Awards, yeah.
Right, okay.
Going off of what you said, 2007, it's a movie year that only occurs like maybe once every, 30 years, or that many good movies are coming out.
Can we just go through like what was nominated for Best Picture that year?
In contention for Best Picture that year was Atonement, Michael Clayton, Juno, and There Will Be Blood, and then obviously No Country for Old Men, which won.
But besides that, there were so many other good movies. There was The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford.
Yeah, other movies from that year, yeah, exactly like you just said. Ratatouille was also that year. There was 3:10 to Yuma that year.
Snap.
3:10 to Yuma. What a great movie. Also in the same year. American Gangster.
Bro, there was Bourne Ultimatum that year.
Into the Wild.
Oh, American Gangster was that year too, 2007. You're right.
Yeah. Into the Wild also. Wow.
Eastern Promises.
Even in the animation category, we have a superstar, right? So.
Seriously, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. I mean, there's so many good movies. Atonement.
The Darjeeling Limited.
Lars and the Real Girl. We mentioned that the other day, or the for the Crazy Stupid Love one.
Oh,
Lars and the Real Girl.
It's in the Gosling verse.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, no, great year for movies for sure.
And we reviewed Michael Clayton, one of the other Best Picture noms that year. Mm-hmm. And I mean, honestly, like that's a pretty decent movie, probably, right? But I don't think it paled in comparison to a movie like this. I think probably this and There Will Be Blood were like the two heavyweights in that year, out of a very heavy class, as we're saying, right?
Right.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've also done Into the Wild, and Michael Clayton has not been released yet, but we will be releasing that.
Oops. Non-linear release schedule. Sorry.
Clearly,
we're behind the curtain for everyone.
We're prioritizing listener suggestions, so give us that. So in that case, I will wrap the preview up with saying thank you, Ershine, for suggesting this movie because it was a great watch, and I've been really busy the last few weeks. It was just really good to sit down and watch this movie. Like I really, really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm. And this was a great watch, even if you're watching it for like the fifth time, which was my case. Yeah.
It was my third time, and but it had been easily a decade since I last saw it. So
I think there's a lot to appreciate in this movie. So it does have kind of that replay value there. I think you can really watch this and pick up different things, and it's nothing like actually I noticed this detail and I rewrite the whole movie. It's like, no, you know what's coming, you've seen it, but you'll still appreciate different things every single time.
Right. You get to study the characters more, and they're nuanced.
The characters, the framing, as Faraz was saying, there's a lot of depth there.
Even if it's not a different thing, you just appreciate it more. The same thing, like is good, so you can appreciate it.
Yeah, and your perspective changes, right? You find yourself identifying more with the sheriff because you're a little bit older, right? Maybe.
I don't know if I'm that old yet.
All right.
We're all reaching our peaks and looking back at the world and saying, "Oh, how it's changed, aren't we?"
I'm at that point, certainly.
Thank you for listening to the preview, everyone. Join us. Obviously, go watch this movie and then join us for the discussion next week.
I'm an old man, guys.
Thanks for listening to this production of The Twice Over. If you haven't already, subscribe and follow wherever you get your podcast. And remember to support us on Patreon or by sharing the podcast with a friend. Feel free to contact us on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook at The Twice Over, or email us at comments@thetwiceover.com. All of the music you heard is from Amerigo Gazaway. Check him out on Bandcamp and Spotify.